And we were talking about Alzheimer's and dementia too, and that's a huge thing because with dementia, Alzheimer's is the shrinking of the brain. And why? Because there's that beta amyloid and the tau and the plaquing, and there's the nutrients can't get into the brain, so cells die off. And so omega-3s help out with neurogenesis and the synaptic pruning and the synaptogenesis and all these cool things where it's the growing still. So it's never too late to start with this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Healthy Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dayon, and I'm excited to talk with Laurel Sterling today. Back with us, Registered Dietitian-Nutritionist, Certified Nutritionist, and National Educator for Carlson Labs. Laurel's worked in the natural products industry since 2000. Over the years, Laurel's counseled hundreds of individuals, lectured at various corporations and events, written numerous articles and blogs, and can be heard on radio shows and podcasts just like this one. Laurel has a genuine passion for educating, informing, and empowering the public through nutrition education. Welcome back to the show, Laurel. How are we doing?
I'm excellent. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for coming on today. How have you been since our last discussion, Laurel?
Oh, great. Everything's going great. Just really busy with doing a lot of stuff online ourselves and educating and starting up with some traveling, which that was phenomenal for me. So
on today's episode, we're going to be talking about brain health through the ages, from infancy to the golden years. Let's hear your thoughts on this. You can kind of set the stage for us, and then we're going to be discussing the role of omega, EPA, DHA in this, anti-inflammatory nutrients, vitamin D. So go ahead and set the stage for our discussion today.
So as we know, this is quite a vast area with, brain health. It's been exploding over the past few years, most specifically with moods, which I'll talk about later, and Alzheimer's and dementia, and a little bit on Parkinson's. But really, we need to kind of look at the beginnings of fish oils. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, and the last one I talked about foods, as far as a lot of the Americans, probably 95% aren't eating enough fish or fish. And that's, again, for a variety of different reasons. And I did mention on there, mercury is one of them, which is an issue, which I'll talk about with pregnant women not having it, because it disrupts it's a neurodisruptor and affects the nerves. So why aren't they eating fish? Again, we're not sure exactly, but they're not. So we need to consume more fish oils. And so it's got such a variety of benefits. When you look at fish oil, the omega-3s are what they're predominant in. And the standard American SAD diet, is high in the omega-6s, which, again, there are healthy omega-6s like your chia seeds, walnuts, and some of your green leafies. But majority of it comes from fast food diets, convenience foods. So that creates an inflammatory aspect in the body. Now, we know inflammation has its time or place, but when it's chronic, that leads into a host of different things, such as brain issues as well, and mood disruption. So with the omega-3s, that helps out with the anti-inflammatories, and we want more of that. So when you break that down a little bit further, you have the EPA and DHA. And like we said, we're going to talk a little bit about D. But DHA specifically is what's predominantly found in the brain, and it supports cognitive function, enhancing the nerve transmission, as well as protecting the neuron's lifespan, with brain development and nervous system development in infants, as well as healthy moods. So that's just DHA. So with EPA, that more so helps out with the brain housekeeping, so to speak. Basically, it helps with the microglia, and it does the synaptic pruning. So that helps out with clearing away any debris in the brain. And so if you're low in omega-3s, that will decrease that synaptic housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And that in the end, which we, like I said, we'll talk about with Alzheimer's and dementia, that contributes in with that. So
Wow.
that's kind of where omega-3s, EPA, and DHA, how they're working in the brain. When you're looking more so into moms and infants, so I'll first start with mom's health. So we can start looking at diet, as we mentioned here. Low in omega-3s, that sets them up for higher occurrences of low preterm birth weight, with less amounts in their breast milk, so that
Mm.
will decrease the IQ they've seen in infants. And so again, women were staying away from fish because of mercury, but they found that if they were consuming it, it was like a 5.5% increase of their IQ when they consumed fish, and it was a 0.01 decrease
Wow.
with the mercury. So really it's 5.49. So it's a benefit overall they were seeing. But if they want to stay away from it, then they can head towards the fish oils,
Right.
typically around 500 milligrams for women. And they specifically need it for themselves because they're seeing higher amounts of postpartum with lower amounts of DHA in these
Wow.
moms. And there's only a certain amount that goes through the breast milk too, as well as the amount of vitamin D through the breast milk. So that's why it's important to also supplement in for the infants as well. So they also saw it was really important for moms to take it at least in the last trimester into the first 12 weeks after
Mm-hmm.
giving birth, because that's when there's that explosion of the brain development. And they said even within the first 2 years for the infant, that their brain nearly doubles in size.
Wow.
So really,
That's
really
powerful.
crucial for them to take, and then to continue on for the children and infants to take it too, which is why we have a great formula. It's a baby's DHA with D in there now, and it's a significant amount. And like I said, we do have the moms, 500 milligrams of primarily DHA. So also we have test kits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are the products
And I
here.
just pulled up for everybody on YouTube. I just pulled up carlsonlabs.com. And then even if you just go up here in the search bar in their products, you can search the word baby, like BABY. And then it comes up with even the mom's DHA with choline, the vegetarian prenatal DHA, which are
Mhm.
really cool options. To be honest, I didn't know that these exist for the baby specifically. That's cool.
Yeah, that was it for a while. We did reformulate it with some extra D, but the prenatal DHA vegetarian and the
Mm-hmm.
mom's DHA with choline, those are actually newer ones as of this year. So we're
Okay.
super excited for those moms that are vegetarian. We know that they're not consuming enough DHA specifically because there is that rate limiting step from the foods, alpha linoleic acid, to
Right.
convert into EPA and then into DHA, which is why it's great to get it straight the DHA from the supplement.
Got it. Can you differentiate the mom's DHA with choline and then just the regular mother's DHA down here?
Yeah,
Is it just more
yeah,
choline added?
yeah, that's what basically it is.
Okay.
It's cool. It's like a preformed amount in there, so that helps out with again all the development of the brain and the nerves. So really important to have. That's a newer one. I think it's got different amounts in there, possibly if you scroll
Yeah.
over the.
So let's
Yeah,
take a look inside here. We have the total omega-3 fats with 215
right.
milligrams per soft gel,
It's less. Yeah,
EPA, DHA, and then if you go all the way to the bottom, you see that phosphatidylcholine in there at
right.
110 milligrams. So again, like you
Mhm.
just mentioned, it's necessary for brain development, for neurological
Mhm.
health, for the nerves to fire properly, for also keeping you relaxed too. It's very important for mental health, choline. So
Right.
that's cool. So again,
Yeah.
that's Carlson Labs. That's specifically the mom's DHA with choline. Remember, we have one with less choline if that's what you're leaning towards. So how important is this 3-to-1 DHA EPA ratio? You might have mentioned it, but that's important to highlight again, which is naturally found.
Right, right. So it's more so the DHA right at this time period that the moms need, which is what I was talking more about
Yeah.
for the infants and the brain development. So that's why it's it's great, and it comes in this format where in this specific product it's a 3-to-1, which is
Yeah.
like in breast milk. So it's a great formula. It's newer. So if moms are looking to add a little bit more of an edge, but again, it's got a little bit less of the DHA and EPA in there. So they could
Perfect.
combine them. Actually, that would be a great product
Right.
to combine the two.
You guys can email Carlson directly up here at carlson@carlsonlabs.com if you have any questions that you feel like, any questions related to any of these products, anything Laurel and I are discussing today. You can also give them a call at 1-888-234-5656, and I'll link those numbers and the email in the description box below as well. Let's talk about vitamin D, Laurel. How important is this as well? And do they connect with each other? Do they work together in the body, the omega-3
Yeah,
fats and then D and vitamin D?
they do. D helps out with that neuronal development, survival. So it's really important. And what we were talking about with moms with low D levels had higher occurrences of
Yeah.
preeclampsia, which that's really severe when they have high blood pressure, protein in the urine, and that can lead to death actually. So there are D receptors found in the brain. For promoting growth and development of the infant, also helping out with calcium and phosphorus absorption for the bone, teeth, for the muscles, just all around, everywhere in the entire body, like the omega-3. So
Yeah.
they definitely do work together in those ways with the brain. And usually we recommend adults around anywhere from 2 to 6,000 IUs, and the infants up to the older children around 400 to 2,000 IUs of that. So again, it's in the baby's DHA formula. But separate when kids are a little bit older, we have the drops too, which
Mm.
don't taste. So they're easy to get in, again, for the mom to add into formula, or for the D drops to put on their breasts when they're breastfeeding. And then again, for the moms to consume that as well, because there is a small amount, but it does go through breast milk because it's a fat soluble vitamin. So we do have these great kits, which I started to talk a little bit about. We teamed up
Yes.
with OmegaQuant, and um, there are test kits where they can test their DHA levels, their vitamin D levels, their all around omega-3 index. So the omega-3 index measures the amount of EPA and DHA in the red blood cell membrane. So it gets in there and it saturates it. So again, moms want the higher DHA. Yes, those are the ones right there. We
Mm-hmm.
also have the hemoglobin A1C too, which is important when
There
we
it is.
talk about brain and cognition in the elderly or mid to elderly. So these are great test kits that you can buy and do at home. Very simply, I've done them for myself and for the whole family. It's just a finger prick, and then you have a little sheet that you put the droplets on,
Mm-hmm.
and you let it dry. You register it, you mail it off the same day or the next day that you do the kit, and then you get the results back generally about 2 weeks or less. And then it would tell you a recommendation if your levels are low for the omega-3s or D. It would recommend how much you should be
Yeah.
adding in. They also have on their website, OmegaQuant, it's for the omega specifically. It's a calculator. So
Mm-hmm.
you can put in where your omega-3s are right now, and then you can assess from there. I'm not sure what it's under, but it's a
Okay.
omega-3 index calculator, and you can put in what your level is, and then it would tell you what you need, how much you need to get
Right.
up to the optimal levels. And what ideally kids should be at 6% for the omega-3 index, and adults should be 8 to 12%. So
Okay.
they have a lot of great
Yeah.
information on there
Thanks
too
for
about,
thanks for highlighting this, Laurel. This is really, really good info. We've never
yeah,
really highlighted this ever, even on the radio or podcast so far. So this is a really good resource,
yes, it is.
omegaquant.com. But you can also order it directly from carlsonlabs.com. I think I've seen a couple of these in the store, but don't quote me on that. We should have these at Healthy Habit Health Foods as well. We can always special order them for you, and then you just come pick
Mhm.
them up here from us at the store. if you want to start doing some of these tests at home. Okay. So again, that's a simple finger prick test, few drops of blood. You mail it to OmegaQuant. In this case, they're looking at your vitamin D in this test kit, but Laurel was saying they have the Omega version. They have a prenatal DHA test. They have the A1C for blood sugar. So that's really, really good stuff. Thanks for highlighting that, Laurel.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah, those
what's
are great.
what's one of the most popular vitamin D products at Carlson? Is it the standalone or is it the one comboed with the K2? What
Oh,
would you say?
that's a great one now. I would say it was probably the standalones because
Okay.
I'm not sure people know enough about the benefits of having the K in with it and how important that
Yeah.
is. I mean, for myself, um, I know it's hugely important. And I think before I might have mentioned I grew up in a dairy farm and
Yeah.
consumed a ton of milk with no D in there. And so my levels were really low when they tested me. So I found out that it was really important for me and for my daughter and husband to start combining the D3K2 together because they again work together at kind of working with those proteins and activating those proteins to start pulling the calcium into the bone and teeth instead of having it lay along your blood vessels and start creating basically atherosclerosis, and none of us want that.
Right.
So that's really important.
Yeah. People
Mhm.
don't think of vitamin D's role enough when it comes to cardiovascular support and how it works with the K2 to help
Exactly.
clear that calcium out of the arteries, put it into the bones instead and the teeth and the
Right.
nails
Right.
instead of
And
inside of the arteries.
exactly. And brain as well. We don't want it to start, laying in the soft tissues anywhere that we don't want. So hugely important, which is why we have it also as a combo for kids. So again, a lot of people don't think about that, but once I learned about it, I started really pushing and educating on the D3K2 for kids as well, because they were seeing it developing in kids, the
Yeah.
atherosclerosis. So that's pretty scary.
Yeah, that's right. It's starting at a younger and younger age when they're starting to get
Right.
that form in the arteries. So
Hmm.
tell us about the MIND diet, MIND. I had that in the show notes for today. And how does this all
Right.
relate?
Well, I mean, again, we were talking dietarily. So the Mediterranean diet was the big one with all the research backing behind it. But then they started looking at the MIND diet, which is a combination of the DASH for blood pressure and the Mediterranean.
Hmm.
So you can pull it up and see all, it's kind of similar to the Mediterranean, just a little bit different. But there were studies looking at that. It was the MIND trial, and they found that there were certain people doing the MIND diet, people were doing the Mediterranean diet, and some were doing the DASH diet. And the most benefits came from the MIND and the Mediterranean. It was basically 53 and 54% had a decreased occurrences of Alzheimer's developing.
Hmm.
So that was huge. So that's why they're pushing this diet along with obviously activity. They found
Right.
activity increases the hippocampus and increases neuronal growth. So, and honestly, some other studies I've seen outside the MIND diet, there was a 2010 study that looked at the standard American Western diet, and they found that there was a higher occurrence of depression with those that consume that as a diet. So, and they've seen other studies where they've looked at a fast food diet and cognition decreasing for hours after consuming just a one fast food meal,
Wow.
which is huge. So again, that shows you when I was talking about the inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, that's where that comes into play.
Wow.
So we really need to start looking at our diets. And we are very low, as I said, in fish, and countries that have higher amounts of fish consumption have less depression typically.
Yeah.
So, and we know that there's this unfortunate explosion of what's going on with anxiety and depression post COVID. It's still out there. There's still a lot of issues, and omega 3s and vitamin D play a huge role with serotonin production and dopamine, and also with the omega 3s with like I said, inflammation. There's research with that with relating to depression. So primarily we have DHA in the brain, and we need to continue supplementing that in because we're not getting enough of the fish. And other studies have seen a link with low amounts of omegas with ADHD and
Hmm.
schizophrenia, bipolar, as well as major depressive disorders. So it's something that we really need to start
Wow.
looking at. I know
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah, and
huge
what they're
thing.
finding is, to your point, they're finding way too much omega 6s relative to the 3s, in all the
Right.
different body tissues and body fat. There's a chart I seen of body fat stores of linolenic acid, which is an omega 3 fatty acid. It's just gone up over time in the human body fat reserves. So while the omega 3s are lagging behind, so we have way too much of the inflammatory fats in the body. Do you
Exactly.
want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talked, I think, last time a little bit about how there's possibly like a 20 to 1 omega 6s to omega 3s where we need it more of like a 2 to 1 ratio. So I just saw something where it was on Tufts and they were talking about 2/3 of the calories consumed for children and teens is now ultra processed foods.
Hmm.
And that further went on to adults, is like 57% of their calories come from ultra processed foods. So they're not getting the whole foods, which you would get natural omega 3s from the foods. So we need to offset this with the consumption of more omega 3s through supplementation if we're not going to get it through the diet. Obviously, I would think diet first to start with,
Yeah.
but because people still want to eat those, we need to really increase the amount of omega 3s. And a general amount for an adult would be for cognition, they say around 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA, primarily of you want to have it of DHA
Hmm.
for cognition. So there's a lot of different studies out there that are looking at, for blood pressure and cardiovascular. But when you're looking also at, there's a researcher, Dr. Michael Lewis,
Hmm.
and he's looking at traumatic brain injuries specifically because he was in one of the um, armed forces, and he started working with football teams as well, and the veterans coming back with traumatic brain injuries. And so he was finding a protocol that he put together with higher amounts. So it's 9 grams of omegas, primarily of DHA, the first week, second week down to 6 grams, third week down to 3 grams, and staying with that 3 grams, specifically, again, primarily DHA. So that is his protocol for traumatic brain injuries, which, again, we're seeing a lot more of that in the youth in these different
Yeah.
programs with soccer and football, um, just anyone in general too would
Right.
benefit from that as well.
No, I
So
think that's the big thing, trying to rebalance the omega 3 to 6. That's a huge thing, and
right,
I would even say like nut and seed consumption is at an all-time high, which are just rich in omega 6 fats,
right,
inflammatory fatty acids, and people are just by the handful slamming
right,
these nuts and seeds, and fish maybe once a week,
right,
once every 2 weeks,
maybe, right,
and
exactly,
not taking any omega 3 supplement, right? So what are you going to do?
exactly,
You're going to be in pain. It promotes cancers, multiple types of cancer when you have omega that ratio off,
mm-hmm.
cardiovascular issues, all kinds of problems. Gut health. I've seen a lot of people with gut issues because they're
Oh,
getting in way too many omega 6s. So it's
mm-hmm.
inflaming their entire gut tract, digestive tract. So
Yeah.
amazing, very important info. We have about 3 minutes to go here today with Laurel Sterling representing Carlson Labs. So what's a good take home then? Where should somebody start? I know you covered the baby DHA products, the prenatal, the mom's
Mm-hmm.
DHA with the choline, which is so informative, by the way. You highlighted OmegaQuant, which we'll be attaching down below. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm going to be telling more people about that now that you put that on my radar. So thank you.
Oh, you're
What's a
welcome.
good recap? We have about like I said, 3 minutes to go. What should somebody know after this
Well,
episode?
I think that again, we've highlighted that it's important that people aren't getting it. It's important to get in
Yeah.
enough omegas. There was research with children in particular. There was a researcher that did. trials with kids in England, and she gave them about 600 milligrams of DHA, and they just had learning issues. And she found that it was a significant increase in their learning and concentration. And so it does a huge amount for the school age children, as well as anybody that's going back to school, that's going back and learning in their 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
60s, anybody that wants to
Right.
continue learning. And we were talking about Alzheimer's and dementia too, and that's a huge thing because with dementia, Alzheimer's, the shrinking of the brain, and why? Because there's that beta amyloid and the tau and the plaquing, and there's the nutrients can't get into the brain, so cells die up. And so omega-3s help out with neurogenesis and the synaptic pruning and the synaptogenesis and all these cool things where it's the growing still. So it's never too late to start with this. It's never too late to start the change, to add it in, because it will help out, as we said, from all the way from prenatally all the way up until 100 plus. That it's huge important, and it's different in the amounts in the children, and we mentioned that earlier, as adults, and for different protocols too. So
Right.
Parkinson's is another one where they're seeing omega-3s and vitamin D low levels with higher amounts of Parkinson's and more severity. So again, these
Wow.
two together, which you will find in a cod liver oil or in some of the other formulas that we have too, like you mentioned, the D and the K and the omegas.
Yeah.
So those are all those fat nutrients are important to get together, which is why we came out with some of those combos. So definitely, definitely try to get more of those in, because we're not getting it through our
No.
diet,
Right.
unfortunately.
Well, thank you, Laurel. That's a perfect place to end it for today. I always appreciate you coming on. This will help a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you.